I am thrilled to be here. I am very honored to be standing here, and I am very thrilled to be sharing this wonderful day today with ambitious and very energetic young women. So thank you very much for inviting me here to be on stage. I'm going to sit down shortly if that's okay. So thank you to the sponsors of Women in Cloud, Gabriella, who is our executive sponsor for SHI International, and all the amazing women who have worked so hard to make today a reality. My name is Thai Lee. I was born to Korean parents, but because I was born in Thailand, my parents decided to name me Thai, which is not a very typical Korean name. In Korean, my name translates to Lee Tae-hee, which means great, peaceful, and freedom and joy, which is a pretty good name for a girl in Korea. And why freedom? Because did you know that Thailand is one of only Asian countries that was never invaded by a foreign power? So sort of like Switzerland of Asia. So as I was growing up, my father's work took us all throughout the world. I lived in Germany, I lived in US when I was very young, I lived in Thailand, and I lived in Korea. But when I was 15 and I was in Korea, my father decided to ship off his two eldest daughters, myself and my older sister, to US. The reason? Because he felt that we could have the best education in the US and best prospects for our lives in the US. So at age 15, we stayed in the home actually, of my father's friend in Western Massachusetts in a small town called Amherst. And there, 2 years later, I entered Amherst College because in 1976, Amherst opened its door to women. For the first year, the freshman class of Amherst College had women, and that was 1976. So I was very lucky to have gone to a college then. And after I went to college, I went back to Korea to work for 3 years. The reason? I had to save enough money to get enough tuition to study in a business school. So 3 years later, with $25,000 in savings, I came back to Massachusetts and went to Harvard Business School for 2 years. And after Harvard, I worked for 3 more years at Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, at American Express. One, to really gain experience in business, and two, to save money to start my own company. So during the 3 years after getting my MBA, I saved enough $20,000 to pay off my second year of tuition at HBS and had $50,000 in saving. And my starting salary at P&G was only $40,000. How is this possible? I had a $400 studio apartment in Cincinnati, Ohio, which even back in 1980s was a pretty cheap price for a nice apartment building. So, I had worked for many years trying to save enough money to attain my educational goal, as well as getting prepared for business. What I want to share with you today are some of the steps and decisions that I took and made that helped me get to where I am today. So the first decision I made was the decision to become an entrepreneur. Now and this decision came when I was merely a 17-year-old student at Amherst College. Now and I think back then, the word entrepreneurship was definitely not in vogue, and I had probably never even heard of the term. But I had decided that with my strengths and weaknesses, a lot of weaknesses in language skills, that I could only be truly successful if I were to own and run my own company. Why did I do that? Well, for those of you who know Amherst College, it's a very competitive liberal arts college. And I was surrounded at age 17 by very, very ambitious and well-prepared students. And I felt totally inadequate. And I thought that I could never be successful working for a large corporation because you need language skills, written language abilities, as well as really social skills that I did not have or could not develop at the time. I did not think that I could be successful being a professor. I didn't think I could be a litigator, for example. So I went through a whole list of career options and ruled it out one by one and decided that really the only option for me was to be an entrepreneur. So the first step I took, the decision to become an entrepreneur. The second step I took was to actually be my own best advocate. And it wasn't very easy for an insecure 17-year-old girl to be my best advocate because, well, I was scared all really throughout my college years and even later. Why was I scared? Well, one, I was an outsider, definitely not a typical college student. As I mentioned, Amherst had just gone co-ed, and so throughout the campus, there were only 10% women, even though our class had 30% women. So as a woman of color, there were not very many minorities. This is now going back to 1970s. I'm very old. So the world in 70s was a very different place than it is today. And definitely not very many immigrants. There were a few international students, mostly from European countries, but definitely not from Asian countries. And shortly after I graduated, actually, there were waves of Asian. And today, you can hardly walk the campuses of colleges and university without seeing a lot of Asians. But the campus back then was very different. So I felt very insecure. And most of all, I was not that familiar or comfortable with American culture. So there was a lot of reasons for me to feel extremely insecure, but I decided that would not inhibit me from cultivating and really crafting the most ambitious goal possible for myself. So the third decision I made is that as I looked back and assessed myself and looked at my strengths and weaknesses, I decided the best way for me to achieve success was to actually outline the goals for my life. And this would be a holistic goal where I look at all my life and actually assume, first of all, that I would live to 100 and actually put together a template for each decade. So for example, my entire 20s was going to be a preparation to launch this entrepreneurship. So what I did was I studied as much as I can about business. I read every business magazine cover to cover. I went to business school so that in case I failed, and I knew there was a large chance that I could fail, that I could go back and get a job. So my entire 20s was really learning decade to get me prepared. And I was going to launch a business by age 30, which actually SHI was established in 1989 when I turned 30. And my 30s was going to be one of extreme focus. So I knew that in order to really be an entrepreneur, you have to be really committed. Many of my friends tell me that they envy me because I have a lot of control over my time, and that is not the case, because when you're starting out, it takes so much focus, and I didn't want distractions. Fortunately, I was married by then, so that I didn't have to worry about dating, which can be a huge source of distraction. And I didn't start a family until I hit 39. So I had my first son at 39. I knew about the fertility curve. That's one of the few things that really impact women, is that there is a set timetable in terms of when it is best or best chances of securing children and family. So, all throughout my 30s, I was able to really singularly focus on making SHI successful. And then at 39, I had my first son, and then at age 44, after my divorce, I chose to be a single mom. It was actually brought horrors to my parents. Were very ashamed for many years, but actually it turned out to be a really good decision for myself. In fact, at age 44, I made the record at New Jersey IVF Clinic, which I was the oldest mom with own eggs. So I tell you all this. So what I want to share with you is the methods I use to craft goals. So I stated that each of my decade has goals and focus that I wanted to put my efforts, energy, and time against it. So my 20s was those of learning, 30s was focus on making the startup really successful, 40s was try to incorporate having family and children into my life if possible, and then 50s. I just turned 60 2 months ago, so I'm in a new, thank you. I'm in a new decade and a new journey. But my focus in terms of career and goal is to actually make sure that SHI survives beyond myself. So there are really 3 holistic aspects to the goal template that I use. The first is personal and family goals. So for example, my goal for the last couple of years, and actually hopefully for the next 5 to 10 years, is going to be to try to spend as much time with my mother, who is 84. That means having vacation with her. I even score myself. Did I really accomplish this goal? I FaceTime with her every other day at minimum, to a point where she tells me, don't call me so much. Fortunately, it's FaceTime, so it's free. My career and financial goals are tied together, but most of all, it starts with health goals. So what does that mean? When I was at Procter & Gamble, one of the really valuable learning I had is that setting goals, you need to make it SMART. So specific, measurable, actionable, relatable, time-bound. So SMART goals. So for example, my health goal would have long-term goal, which is I would like to live beyond 100. So that's a very specific long-term goal. I actually make that into a decade goal. So for me, this year, I have to make sure that I get all the annual checkup. In addition to having all the usual metrics, so BMI, weight, cholesterol, I make sure that if I should have a serious disease, that I could help really maximize my chances of recovering from it by discovering it early enough. Really, without your health, there's really nothing else, right, that matters in life. So I'm just giving you examples of how I set the goal, something that you might want to try. There is a method called Goal Cultivator, which can go into detail as to how you could really view your life holistically. So as Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, right? You want to know what you want to accomplish while you're here on Earth. Because time is short, and I can't believe I'm 60 myself, but time will fly. So the 3 actions and decisions I made: become an entrepreneur, which I understand many of you have made already. 2, be your own best advocate. Don't beat yourself up. Only focus on things that you have control over. Don't worry about the rest of it. 3rd is set a goal for your life. Cut it into different components. They all work together holistically. and work on it every single day so that at the end of the day, you know where you're going. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs, I have a few words of advice as well. First word of that advice, I know many of you might be looking for external funding. Don't despair if you can't find an investor. In fact, one of the best things that happened to SHI is that we were not able to get bank credit line. We weren't even looking for private equity or venture capital at the time because I did not believe that our business would be attractive to that community. So, and because we weren't able to raise money, all of our growth over the last 29 years had to be organic. And that gives a company a certain amount of discipline that cannot easily be really covered. Because if you're growing, you take an outside investor, pretty soon you'll find that you will lose control over not only the company, but many other aspects of your business. So if you can raise money, great. You know, there's a lot of benefits to raising money and accelerating your business. But if you don't, it's okay. Because maybe, like myself, you would be grateful for not being able to raise money 30 years later. Second advice I give is don't rush to go public. So I know many of the classmates from business school, and their goal is to raise money, grow the company quickly, sell or IPO the company. Actually, there's a whole lot of negative that comes from running a public company. So as long as possible, as long as you can, try to grow your company organically and delay going public as long as possible. So those are the two words I have for the entrepreneurs who are on this amazing, exciting journey. It's going to be very scary at times, but believe in yourself, and most of all, it's okay to fail. It is okay to fail. At least you will have tried and you will have done your best. So those are the words from somebody who has been on this journey for many decades and hopefully many more decades to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ty.